I'm recording, and that means we've started. Hello, welcome to a very special Riot Act with me, Stephen Hill. I'm with Renfrey Deadman. He's not here today, but I'm delighted and honoured to be joined by my good friend, Will Gould from Creeper. How are you doing, Will? Nice to see you, buddy.
Mate, it's lovely to see you, Steve. I am doing very well. It's as I was just saying, it's been a very manic time for me at the moment. It's trying to put a record out in the middle of a global pandemic has been as complicated as you can probably imagine. But yeah, it's been cool. It's kind of a relief knowing that it's kind of coming out now after it was put back a little while and everything. So just working all the time, working non-stop. But it's all good. It's chatting about things I like to talk about, so that's good.
Well, mate, I was just saying before we started actually recording that we're going to try and make this like sort of mufti day at school rather than it being work. This is going to be fun, Will. I'm going to try and make it fun. And to be fair to you, of all the musicians who have been doing various things over this lockdown period, you look like you've been having the most fun. You've been doing stories on your Instagram, doing poetry, all kinds of stuff. How's sort of as a creative person, how's being kind of locked down and trying to find something creative to do been treating you?
Well, I think that I when I've been asked this before, I've always said the same thing. But I think actually, in this instance, you can probably relate to this more than you realise. You know, coming from DIY punk, you're kind of used to making something out of nothing. That's how you start out with. The whole idea is that you're going on stage and you guys can barely play your instruments, and you're just kind of making it work. You're kind of using the tools around you. A limited toolbox is always what you have when you're doing music in DIY punk. You know, you never had the best drummer, you never had the best guitar players, you never had the best singer, and so you just kind of make something out of nothing. Half the gigs I used to book were just like shows in the King Alfred's pub upstairs with like that awful PA that I used to have cut around, and I'd make a big chili, and you know, like I was saying this exact same thing the other day, but it's like that's kind of what this is like. It's not that startling for me because I'm like, oh. The palette, the toolbox has just been reducted quite a lot, and all we've got is a little less to play with. But you can still do just as much creativity and just be just as adventurous with fewer tools as you can with many, if you've got the imagination for it. So I try to approach it like that, and I think coming from the scene we've come from has really helped with that too.
Yeah, I mean, you're dead right, I think there will be certain people who... I mean, we were talking about this with pop artists the other day, how people need so much in way of different producers and other songwriters and stuff. And I just think if you were someone who was quite creative, but you were used to kind of leaning on people, that's got to be a really difficult thing to be sort of holed up in your apartment or your mansion if you happen to be super, super duper successful. But yeah, like you say, the beauty of, you know, a band like Creeper is, I think you've always sort of had ambition to do big things, no matter what the budget is, no matter what the amount of people watching are. I think that's, you know, obviously, and that kind of shows through in the sort of stuff that you've been doing whilst this lockdown period's been happening as well.
Well, thanks, man. Yeah, I like to think that Creeper kind of flourishes when we're in the shit, you know, like that. That's kind of like where we're most comfortable. And every time we have a little bit of like kind of success in a bigger scale, we always tend to mess that up a bit somehow. We're always better when we're fighting against it a little bit. But I know what you mean about bands. One of the things I hear quite a lot from people who work in the record industry, like major labels and things, is that a band gets signed and they think that's the finish line. They've done it, and they come in, and then the band label go, okay, cool. So we've got X amount of money to make a video with. What do you want to do? And they go, oh, I thought you would come up with that. And then the record label are coming up with the ideas for this. The things that irk me the most about doing Creeper is when someone insinuates that I've got someone coming up with my marketing ideas for me. Because we have great marketing people there 100%, but everything that comes out of Creeper comes from us. Every single thing. And that's why you don't get other major label bands kind of doing an elaborate treasure hunt through, like through a 70s text-based computer game. You know, like that you don't get that because we're building this stuff ourselves. We still approach it in a DIY way. And that's kind of how we always have. And I think that's the way it should be. That's the way you should be. That's how all the good bands were, you know?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, I've got to say, I think any marketing person that suggested to a major label band that they do some of the things that you guys have done, he probably wouldn't last very long in his job because it feels like a lot of fucking hard work just to get off the shit that you guys have even attempted to do started. But anyway, we will talk about stuff like this a little bit later. I want to go back to the 1st of November 2018, Will. I'm sure you know what that date represents. You split up that night, didn't you? At Koko.
Yeah. Well, it was the end of the band, like as you knew it. It was the end of that whole chapter, and that chapter had spanned 5 years. You know, like, and the band will never be that same band again. Like it really did die in a way. And there were times I didn't even think the second incarnation of the band would even resurface. I felt like there was times over the course of that year that followed the Koko show where I genuinely felt like that was it. Even though we had planned for this rebirth, it felt like the world was kind of had a deck stacked against us in lots of ways. But coming to that point, we'd already done when we launched into the album. We launched with this elaborate marketing campaign that we devised. It was based on if you recall, I spoke to you about this quite a lot at the time. I remember about the Blair Witch Project and how that was marketed, and we were riffing off lots of how our favourite horror films were marketed, with kind of blending reality and fiction, so you couldn't really quite see what was what. And that's when like a lot of the 90s stuff in me like comes out, because that's what the 90s did so well, and especially in like professional wrestling, kind of merging the two, Jerry Springer, you know, what's scripted, what's not. That was the pop culture I grew up kind of ingesting and being around, and so it was a lot of those sorts of tricks. But when we came to the end of the campaign, I knew it had to end in the way it was going to. I knew that whatever we did after was going to be a very elaborate affair to get right, and that we would walk a line with it, and that it would be something really creative and look at it in a completely different shape. So I felt like the Ziggy homage made complete sense, and performing the ultimate vanishing act on stage while the audience was still in the room. And then even when the video finished, they ran down to the side. The band was just completely gone. I felt like that was a great way to end it, with a great piece of like theatre on stage and a moment. So yeah, it was quite a lot more shocking than you realise, though. You know, like more than you think. It was you put the jackets down. Which we'd taken from The Undertaker at WrestleMania, leaving his gloves and his hat in the ring. You know, like we're always riffing on pop culture stuff all the time. And but doing that and then leaving behind something like an emblem that had been like our it'd been our mission statement from the offset in a way. And we'd taken it around the world with us. You know, it'd been with me at every great, amazing moment on a show. Every moment when I was frustrated and angry in the rain, just smoking a cigarette outside. Every time anything had happened with the band, that was with us. And then we were leaving it and choosing to walk away from it when everybody in the world was telling us not to. I remember like doing meetings and things, and people trying to talk me round from ditching the band and killing it off in the way we had, like trying to stop us from killing the logo off and killing the callus up. But like as soon as you start seeing it as a logo anyway, you've got a complete lack of understanding as to what the band's doing with it in the first place. As soon as you see it as a logo, you don't understand anyway, and so we're not speaking the same language. It's not a logo. This is like a symbol. This is like it meant a lot more than just a logo. So yeah, it was weird. It was euphoric. It was harrowing. It was scary. It was a panic in the room, and yeah, like then what ensued was a year of social media hiatus, which is one of the healthiest things you can do. But unfortunately, it was happening in a very chaotic time.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you if, even with all that in mind, even going into that show, knowing that you were going to do that, the kind of trepidation. I mean, you know, I mean, I'm sure you've seen a lot more than me, but I've seen tons of people with that callous heart tattooed on them. You guys have an incredibly passionate, loyal fan base, a really hardened fan base. Did you anticipate just how? Because I couldn't go to the show. I had to review another gig that night. I can't remember what it was, but I couldn't go to the show. But on Twitter, the next day and straight after the show, I was just like, oh my God, people are losing their fucking mind. And I think maybe a lot of them weren't aware of the homages that you were making. I mean, maybe some of them weren't familiar with the Ziggy Stardust thing or whatever. But once it had happened, did you look at it and go, oh yeah, that's what I expected people to do? Because that was a serious serious reaction that you guys got to doing that.
Yeah, I don't think it was really like in my mind, I didn't really know how people were going to react. And this is one of the things in that podcast you've just done. One of the things that I was saying there was like, I felt like I knew what was going to happen, and I felt like I had more insight than anyone because I orchestrated the whole thing. But I didn't have any idea what was going on. I had no idea how that was going to blow up and what was going to happen with that. But what we were trying to do is kind of almost time capsule the Callous Heart. That can't be tarnished anymore. It can't be tarnished by anything, by like a bad show, us getting old, and and still wearing that patch on the stage. It's locked in a time frame now. Like you have that. Every time you see a photo of us wearing that Callous Heart patch, you know that was from that time, and it was never tarnished. It was never ruined. It was kept safe, and so that was what one of the ideas was. But the really visceral reaction from some fans, like really aggressiveness from some people, and I understand. I've grown to understand a lot more that sort of behavior. But I don't know. For me, it was completely the right move, and in a lot of ways, I created that, so I had the right to destroy it as well. And I think that that was the right time to do it. Like the fact that you can go to a Creeper show and you never know when we're doing those big headline shows what's going to happen. Every time we try to catch people off guard. We're investing our money into making these shows spectacular every time. Why would you go and see another band in town next time round? At the end of this campaign, because because what are we gonna do? That's what I want it to be like. I want it to be like when we go through up in Manchester. People go, what are they gonna do? When we're traveling around the place, I like the idea of that unpredictability and seeing a spectacle. I think that that was one of the things that the things that Creeper needed to do back in when we first started, was just trying to put spectacle and theatricality and pomp back into punk rock and mystery and things. And so yeah, it was a really, really crazy night. It feels like a lifetime ago now, almost like a dream. But but on quite the journey since then. Re-emerging a year to the day, like my life would completely change by the time we'd come back from November 1st. My entire world was upside down. I was living in a completely different city, and me and my girlfriend had broke up, and I was with Charlotte, and I made a record in Los Angeles. I'd been through the most difficult year of my life in terms of Ian Miles' mental health, and we were just a completely different setup. It was a very trialing time, but in a weird way, these things kind of happen. I hate to say it because it sounds so corny, but these things kind of happen for a reason sometimes, and we needed to kill that band off, and by cutting that off, we literally allowed ourselves a cleansing of the palate to be able to make something new out of all of the things that were happening around us. And it wasn't in the same form. It was something new and fresh and exciting for us. And that helped us, retain that conviction of playing every night and being excited about music and stuff again,
Yeah. I think you need to do that. I mean, I hope you don't mind me saying. I mean, both of us, we bumped into each other at a gig. I think it was the Employed to Serve show at the Garage.
Yes,
which was about kind of 5 months later, and we went for a drink, and we were both in a position where I think both of our lives had changed quite a lot, and we were both sort of going, it's pretty weird, this, right? Isn't it? It's kind of weird. And I did at the time kind of wonder, I mean, I don't do much really, but I was like, how is this going to sort of filter into the next iteration of what Creeper become? And I remember speaking to you at the time, and I felt like it was one of the only times I'd spoken to you where I thought maybe you didn't quite know what was going to happen, because when shit like that goes down, all the things that you've just mentioned, and obviously we don't want to get too much into each other's personal lives or whatever, but you do kind of go, I don't really know. You get shaken, and you have to sort of reappraise every single thing that you've ever thought about doing at that time, don't you?
Well, it's weird, isn't it? I feel like it's almost like the tortoise going into its shell, and you want to kind of just hide under a rock for a while. And I was allowed this massive rock, this massive thing to hide under, which was this year off, to work everything out, to kind of get the confidence to go out and be on stage again and talk about this sort of thing, which for a long time was just absolutely not going to happen. Especially all the stuff with Ian And my mother's partner dying so quickly. We like she died the day he died the day before Ian got sectioned, and so it was all very, very traumatic, all very, very quick, and quite shocking. Like it was quite it really shocked me what had happened. But I felt like we said this record's cursed quite a few times. We've gone, this is a cursed record. This is something that we felt like it was like The Exorcist or something, that movie where everyone who touched it was cursed, or like a pharaoh's tomb. The curses kind of leaves its way onto everyone, and yeah, like that. Unfortunately, that's kind of how this was. Everybody who seemed to come into contact with this record seemed to be caught by this curse, and some of us got stung twice. But like our producer Zandy was going through his massive divorce, and like it was the recording plant that pressed the record burnt to the ground after it was pressed out in California, and the cello player from the orchestra that plays on it broke his leg on the morning of the day we were supposed to record. And then Graham Humphreys, who does all the poster art for us, fell down an escalator and was hospitalised when he got sent the brief. It was just like one of those weird myths that that seemed to constantly realise itself, and oh man, it was exhausting. So yeah, the whole thing was strange. There are definitely times where I was very concerned about what to do. I knew I was making really good music, and I knew that I had some really good ideas. But it's so much more than just that with Creeper. It's just not just a record we're throwing together with some artwork and we're just bashing it out. These records take like a huge chunk of my energy in my life, and yeah, it was quite concerning. A lot of that. It was a worrying time when I saw you in London that day.
It was, yeah. I think we both sort of went, oh, it's been brutal, man.
I know.
Yeah, but anyway, here we are now. The album's fucking great, which we should say.
Thank you very much.
The album's fucking great. It's called Sex, Death and the Infinite Void. It should be going out, if you're watching this YouTube or listen to the podcast on the day it comes out. The album's out tomorrow, I believe, as we're recording this. And I mean, I didn't really know what to expect from the record. I've sort of deliberately, over the last year or so, thought, when a band release one single or one song from an album, if I'm really invested in them, I'll listen to one song. But I've kind of deliberately tried to avoid listening to sort of 3 or 4 songs if a band release them in advance, because I want to listen to the album, and particularly for a band like you guys, I want to listen to the album in its entirety. And I've been sort of slamming the album for about a week now, and there are reference points on it which I just never ever would have thought were ever going to come up. Where's this record come from musically, Will, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, it all started from we wanted to make this American record. The whole thing started off with wanting to make an American record. It was this kind of fantasy I had, I think, of going out to. I was like, it got to the point with Creeper where we got so far away from the DIY scene, and how funny was it that me and Ian Miles, who used to write songs in his mum's shed, were now going to be in Hollywood making a record. And so we decided that was funny, and that was it was a story, it was a cool thing to do, and it kind of had because we'd spent so much time traveling around America, it really made sense to make the record in the places we've been since our first one. So I started pulling out records and listening to stuff that I felt like would make what do I think is classic Americana to me, and just think about that yourself, ponder that question for a second. So obviously there's Bruce Springsteen and all that stuff, that 100%. Those records are very present on this album, and you could probably say the Eagles and things like that too. But more so, I think the Phil Spector records that I've mentioned, I talked to you about in the past, being into the Phil Spector, and Roy Orbison and country music, and especially that kind of the Leonard Cohens of the world, the baritone, that big baritone over the top kind of Las Vegas Elvis sort of thing. So I had all this kind of this real spectrum of stuff that I pulled out that I felt these kind of work. But as I got working through that stuff, I quickly realized we're missing key bits here. This doesn't tell our story properly. This is just an American record, you know. And I realized the way to get to this American sound was to see it through the lens of what's actually going on. That kind of what we've been speaking about, the fiction dosed with the reality, and so I started looking back. Like one time, it was in this diner. Really frustrated. I couldn't find the magic that I needed, and T-Rex came on, and I went, This is my band. Like this is. I've grown up with this music. 70s. I'm not the Hoople and David Bowie and T-Rex was always the stuff I grew up with. Yeah. And so then I was like, this stuff it will work perfectly. What would happen if, you know, what David Bowie came out here and made a record, you know, like back in the 70s, and you know, like the Rolling Stones and bands like that. This is the land where they, you know, where records are made for bands like that. So I started getting really into that, pulling from all this stuff, and then going all this rock and roll and stuff as well. And then I started thinking as well about more current stuff and more things that were inherently British that I felt like were really good reference points. So that's where the Brit-pop came into it. And when all the Brit-pop came into it, like the thing about Brit-pop is there's so much glam rock and 70s rock and roll in Brit-pop. Yeah. Like it's just everywhere. Like, you know, Stand By Me, the Oasis song, is you know, quite famously All the Young Dudes. It's the same, you know. Instead of All the Young Dudes, it's Stand By Me, Nobody Knows, you know. So
for
like
9 minutes,
it's the same. Yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same thing as All the Young Dudes. It's exactly the same thing. So yeah, and the Beatles and things like that before them as well. That's kind of. So I was like, okay, so let's take this and try and start putting this. Let's try and start seeing some of these Britpop records through this American lens. There was there's the Suede reference point. It was a massive, obvious one with Annabelle for the first kind of 5 seconds or so. But one of the engineers we were using in England, a bloke called Rich, who he'd worked on that Suede record. You know, so like we had this English engineer who we would record bits with and send them back to LA, who had made that record. He'd been a part of it. He was an engineer on the Suede record, the very one that we were referencing and tipping our hat to. So it was like perfect, you know, like it was weird. Yeah. And then we had Zandy, who would bring in, like, you know, members of the Philharmonic Orchestra to record orchestral parts on top of these songs and add that kind of sheen and that slick production. We've got like Nancy Sinatra and like kind of style duets on this record with Hannah, and you know, these are classic American tropes, like these really over the top things. And then there's that kind of tempered with that kind of inherent Britishness of the bands that it's referenced. But there's really been so many different parts of that, you know. There's so much kind of noir to this record, with, like, you know, the Chris Isaacs of the world, the heavy Pulp leaning on a lot of the vocal, like there's these things that are interacting with each other on this record. These like an American production sound, like where it's all guns blazing or really over the top, and then something else that's very, very typically English, like a riff or something that's very that would make much more sense on one of those Britpop records. So yeah, it's a real kind of juggling act of things, and it took a while to kind of get the you know, the parts right, to make sure we were like getting it equal and it was balanced, you know.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I noticed the Britpop stuff. I mean, it's funny that it's been done that way round, because I noticed the Britpop stuff. I mean, I've got my notes in front of me, and I've put Suede, Pulp, The Divine Comedy, The Long Pigs, The Auteurs, even Space, right? Even like the Lightning Seeds at some points as well that I've put down.
Oh, 100%. The Lightning Seeds, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, great. Again, like those 60s melodies, like that. It's pure kind of brilliant British pop music from that kind of
it's the Walker Brothers and you know, like these are things that we've been ripping from quite heavily on a lot of these records, this album even.
But then as I get kind of later onto it, I've put down Chris Isaac and Tom Waits and even and Typo and Danzig and stuff like that as well, and that's the stuff that kind of came out, and I actually put the Sam's Town era, the Killers as well. So
I think what you're referencing here is and the two of them would be on the nose. The Typo and the Killers would be probably on that song Black Moon, where you've got the in terms of the structure, it's very Sam's Town, and the chorus is basically like Typo worship, and like in terms of you know, like it's, you know, that was on purpose. I was trying to do that, like, and like that's really cool. You picked up on those things. That song does those two things in the same song. Very cool. Yeah. It's cool you noticed all that, Steve. That's rad.
Well, I mean, mate, like I said, I've given a few listens, and it's just, do you know what? I mean, I have to say, I've become a notorious sort of Britpop apologist over the last few years, because when I was a kid, probably much like you know, it was the omnipresent thing, and I was into skate punk, and I was into, you know, Machine Head and whatever, and liking Britpop was like, no, I can't like that. But as the years have gone on, and it's become kind of less and less cool, and you know, it's kind of not really cool to name check the fucking Lightning Seeds in 2020. Do you know what I mean? It's not like a zeitgeisty cool thing to do. I mean, I actually think that's quite a brave thing for you guys to go, we're going to do Suede. Like, who talks about Suede in 2020? Not really anybody, but they were such a massive band, such a definitive band of a definitive part of the history and culture of this country. And I think I personally am delighted to hear those references come up on a modern record.
Man, that's fucking awesome. I feel very similarly. I like it. It's one of those things, you know, like even like Pulp and stuff. When you hear that in a nightclub, and you hear like Disco 2000 or something come on, and like that's that riff, and it's so like. Now is there's nothing really like that. That's like a kind of dead. I guess it's a disco song, I suppose, as well. But like Common People and all that different stuff, like those big songs from Different Class. That record's absolutely outrageous. It's such an incredible record. Still to this day, it holds up so well. But yeah. Who's like? I guess there's not that many people kind of doing that stuff these days. It's kind of seen as a bit hokey, maybe a little bit now. I don't know. Jarvis Cocker released an amazing new song recently, which I absolutely loved. But yeah, the same with like with Suede and those references. I think the reason that it related to me so much when I was younger was because my dad would play things that was not a million miles away from it in terms of from the 70s records. You know, like. The Bowie stuff is a massive leaning on that vocal, you know. Like if you think about the singles from the Suede records, what's the most famous Suede songs? Probably like the Beautiful Ones or something like that, you know.
Animal Nitrate.
You babies, like Animal Nitrate. But that's it's like lots of that's kind of there's massive chunks of David Bowie in that, like everywhere, like the falsetto vocal and. It's how androgynous it was at the time as well, with Brett being really playing up to that. Really, really related to me. Like, I loved it. I absolutely got into it. There's an amazing footage of them playing an awards show. I don't know if you've ever seen it. And they just like it's just when they're a 4-piece. They're playing Animal Nitrate, I believe. Yeah. And it's just amazing. Like the way they performed, how out there, how camp it is, just absolutely incredible. So good.
I mean, it really is like. I think what it proves is that kind of good music will endure, you know, because like you say, we spoke on the podcast before about Viva Brother, who were the sort of, you know, Britpop revivalists about 10 years ago. And it's just, you can't just paint the shell of Britpop. You can't just put on a Kickers jumper and say Park Life and expect it to be, you know, it to kind of connect with people in the way that it did. And I think the fact that no one aside from going, you know, weren't Oasis good, there's not really a lot of people that talk about, I mean, particularly I think some of the more underrated albums. I mean, I was about to say Paradise sounds more like This Is Hardcore era pulp than it does sort of anything absolutely else. And that's a classy record, you know, but people don't really speak about that so much.
Well, that record didn't have that many big singles on it. That's the thing. No. Like that's why no one talks about This Is Hardcore. There are some amazing, well-known songs from that record, but that's not what you think about when the general public thinks about Pulp. You know, but this is funny what you said about that, because I completely agree. I think the whole reason that the 70s stuff that was in Britpop to begin with didn't just seem like a 70s throwback was because it had other ideas in it as well. And You know, like it was mixed. That's why Britpop stands alone and isn't just someone's done some 70. You know, these are 70s rock kind of chord progressions and Beatlesy melodies and that's it's just this. It was its own thing because there was so much to it. So much else going on. I think also about the Britpop thing. You know, like a band like the Bouncing Souls, like the Bouncing Souls. Kind of, they do that ole ole, you know, like ole ole, like it's football songs, and a lot of the time, like the power. I'm not a football guy, I'm not a sports guy at all, but the power of a crowd of people being able to sing a chorus is undeniable. When you hear like a giant gang vocal chorus, like it's amazing, and the Bouncing Souls do it throughout their records, and I think that's how I got to it in the first place. But the reason I think I probably like the Bouncing Souls as I got older was because we were brought up in the era of the biggest kind of football songs you ever had. You know, how many times, you know, I remember Wonderwall coming out, you know, like I was a kid, but like, and that is like, these are big songs that like universally can be sung. When we were trying to write a song like Annabelle, I wanted that chorus to feel like that, something that anyone could sing. You know, that like what I love about a football crowd is when they have beef with a player, they can change the lyric to be about the player that they hate or whatever. And I was like, that's the power of that. Is if you can get something that everyone can sing, you know, it's the same reason. Like this is completely off topic, but the same reason like Robbie Williams is like. Was so successful is because everyone can sing those songs. He's not the most talented singer in the world. He's just the guy out there singing them, you know. Like, but like, and I think that's the magic of there's some of the magic of Britpop and stuff as well. It's that anyone can sing it, and you can just be at a pub and it comes on, and you're a bit pissed, or you're at a wedding and your dad's singing it really loud. You know, like one of those songs, those massive things. And I think that's the power of those Britpop songs too. Those Oasis songs for sure. But Suede, like also, there's like, you know, Suede was different to Oasis in so many ways because they seemed like they were from the underworld a little bit more, you know, like they seemed like they didn't seem like your typical you know your typical kind of lads at the pub, you know, they seemed like they had a bit more going on.
Well, they were kind of the band who were sort of first in line for Britpop. They were kind of, I think they were kind of the first band that got people's attention. Whilst grunge was going on, no one really wanted to think about glam rock and guys in, you know, silky shirts and floppy hair and stuff. It was all flannel and this is straight down the line and it's happening, and grunge is grunge and we're stripping everything back. And then Brett Anderson comes along, this kind of effect, you know, like high voice, you know, kind of cut from the same cloth as someone like Morrissey, and it's just.
What you were saying just now was about Britpop and about, you know, what Brett was wearing on stage, and I guess like the thing about that is in to start this question again, I suppose, in regards to the fashion element of it, this happens every single time. Happened with glam rock, and it was kind of, you think about the time where glam rock was happening and the country needed something like that, then that was kind of taken out of the way for a while. In the 80s with some more flamboyance, but like it was in a different sort of way. Grunge obviously killed off hair metal, and kind of it's always been cyclical almost. This sort of it's back and forth, and then obviously emo came along in 2005, and I took things that been quite straight up in metal and punk and stuff, and made it into a flamboyant, like, you know, ridiculous show, like, and took a load of elements again from Britpop and from 70s rock, and it was mixing that up in it as well, especially My Chemical Romance and bands like that, you know, makeup and theatricality. So I think that's a similar thing, isn't it? Like that's kind of, it kind of goes around in a big circle. Would you say?
Yeah, it does. But I mean, this is something I was going to say to you actually. Is, you know, I'm sure you're aware that your band get compared to AFI and My Chemical Romance a fair bit, but I don't think people can say that now. I mean, if they are, they're just sort of looking at, you know, haircuts and t-shirts maybe that you wear off. I mean, I don't really think there's, on this particular record, I mean, certainly AFI have never done anything kind of close to, and I know Davey is obviously a massive fan of Robert Smith and, you know, kind of British music for sure, but I don't think there's any AFI albums that really draw from this particular strand of music that you're drawing from on this record.
It's weird. I always felt like those comparisons were like, they kind of apt a little in the beginning, I think. But I felt like over time, like I ended up getting incredibly frustrated with that.
I'm sure.
And
Yeah.
like I used to feel, I kept feeling like I was living in someone's shadow the entire time, and I also felt it was a little bit unfair because, but this, of course, I'm going to feel like that. I'm the person making the art and the music that you're talking about when people say those things, but. People used to say to us, like the you know, within the same breath, they'd say, you sound just like Alkaline Trio. And then they go, oh, you sound just like AFI. And then they go, you sound just like My Chemical Romance. 3 bands that sound nothing like one another. And our only notable similarities come from that the singers wear eyeliner. And I was like, so I at first I took it as a real compliment. It was really nice because I loved all those bands. All those bands are wonderful and really big parts of my childhood and still some of my favourite bands to this day. But I was like, it just felt like it was like lazy a little, like towards the end anyway. Especially when we were doing the things we were doing with our live shows and things. That was so not the same as the bands I just mentioned. There were different things, different theatrics. Certainly we're similar in that all those bands like theatrics, I suppose. But it became frustrating. By the end of it, I was like, yeah, there's parts of this I can see where you're coming from, 100%. I'm not trying to pretend that anything I've done is 100% unique. Well, I'm certainly pastiching and magpieing from a lot of different stuff and trying to make something of my own in between. But by the end of it, like, I got to the point where I was like, please don't mention My Chemical Romance to me in an interview again. Like, I feel like I spent, when they came back, I spent more time talking about their band than I did my own. And I was like, I love that band, and I'll be at those shows. They're a fantastic band, one of my favourites, one of the biggest bands in the world. Loved them. But, like, it just got to the point where I was like, please, stop asking me. I don't know anything about, like, you know, I met Frank a couple of times. He's lovely. He's a really nice guy. But that's as far as my involvement in their career goes. I have nothing to add to it. I can tell you about going to see them back in 2005, if you like, because I had a great time. It was really fun, and you know, really liked their band, really respect them. Massive influence on me as a young man, 100%. But like, I don't know, like if you've come to ask me about my record, and then people were like, you know, that's what was happening towards the end of the last campaign. People come to ask me about the record, and then talking to me about My Chemical Romance. Do you think they'll ever get back together? And it's like, I don't know why you've asked me that. Like, is it because I'm sat here wearing eyeliner? You know?
I find it kind of frustrating. It must be really frustrating for you, but I find it kind of frustrating when people throw out these, what they think are good kind of comparisons for bands, which to me just shows they don't listen to a lot of music. I think the best music, and the reason why I like the new Creeper record so much, is because it feels to me like a bigger composite of, like you say, magpieing a wider variety of things. If your frame of reference is really wide, you make more interesting music. If you're listening to T-Rex and Tom Waits and Typo Negative, and you're thinking about kind of Kayfabe and the Blair Witch Project, you're probably going to make more interesting music than somebody who just listens to NoFX and makes a band or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And I think a lot of people don't listen to enough music to be able to pick those things out, and I can understand why that would be quite frustrating. And I find it, you know, I find it frustrating when we talk about bands, like when I talk about the Code Orange album, and I go, it sounds like Clipping and JPEG Mafia and Atari Teenage Riot, and some dopey metalhead goes, it just sounds like Marilyn Manson, and you go, well, you just listen to Marilyn Manson. That's why you think that. So I can. It
reminds me of that. Have you ever seen Garth Marenghi's Dark Place? You ever seen that show?
Yeah.
That's so good. There's that great bit where Garth Marenghi talks about. He says, you know, I'm quite famously the one writer who's written more books than he's read, and I feel like that's it's really apt to some of this, because it's like, it's funny, like you say. I feel like sometimes people just like are after one thing. They grew up with one thing, and they want you to give them one thing. And it was like always quite difficult to kind of live in the shadow of a band where people are going, well, they're the next My Chemical Romance. And I was like, that's a really difficult thing for you to say to me. Obviously, I appreciate what you're trying to say. I think there's a compliment in there, but like that's also like, it's also like you're asking me to fill the shoes of something that was so important to so many people, that like was of its time, was like was timed perfectly, and these records just happened really organically and naturally, and I was like, I'm just out here doing what I've always done, like this. I'm just making these theatrical releases, and so yeah. But this next one, like that was part of the decision to completely rebuild was, well, let's show everybody what else we can do. Like we're not a one-trick pony here. Like yeah, like we're from goth punk, but like I played in different types of bands all growing up. I've spent my whole life listening to lots of different sorts of music. Wouldn't it be cool if we could make something that our kids and our audience trusted us enough with as a group of people, that they even if they're not familiar with those reference points, even if they'd never listened to Tom Waits, you know, like if they'd follow you down the rabbit hole, so to speak, and follow along with you and take notice of what's going on and trust you with it, because they might find another band now from listening to this record. They'll go, holy fucking shit, these Suede records are amazing. Oh my god, like this is music for me, you know, like and that's how this all works. That's how I got into loads of other bands growing up. So that was always the thing, and it's cool. Like this record's like such a different type of record. And I remember thinking at the time, after ignoring and running all the stop signs that everyone kept putting up in front of us, going, "You gotta stop, guys! You gotta stop! We're gonna alienate everybody. We're gonna like." And I remember thinking, no, like these people are smarter than you're giving them credit for. Like that we've got to keep going. We've got to keep seeing this through. Oh god, so we're gonna lose the logo and you're gonna completely change the sound. I was like, yeah, like we've got to. Like we're stagnant right now. We're like, this act is tired. Like it's we're turning up the festivals and loads of people are showing up to see us, which is amazing. But like, they've all seen the show before. They know what to expect. They know they know what's happening behind the curtain at this point. They know, they're in on the gimmick. You know, they're like to use a wrestling term, but like they know how the sausage is made at this point. So we need to come back with a new sausage, and so that was the idea. But then it was like, the problem was, Steve, the hardest thing was getting out there and going, right, killed the band off, great, everything's fine. What the fuck do we do now? Like, how do we, like, we've never written Britpop before. I've never written that before. Like, I know, like, I know all about the genre, like, and there's loads of different types of Britpop that aren't the same as each other. You know, Pulp do a completely different thing to Suede, who do a completely different thing to Oasis, who do a completely different thing to Blur, like the big four there. But how do you sit down and write this? And so I sat at a piano for ages trying to work out how to write a chorus, like we ended up, the thing we ended up with was the Annabelle chorus, that kind of the big R's and stuff, and realizing that Hannah can sing just so high, and I was just like, oh, this is perfect. Anything's going to sound good with that. But working all that out, like literally having to learn like a completely different way of songwriting, a completely different like schooling and technique and how we approach that. That's why it took so long, because we didn't know how to write a song like Paradise, like, at the beginning. It was like, we'd come from writing 4-chord fast punk songs with, like, dramatic parts, and that were, like, for the most part, like, fairly simple in terms of that. Like, I'm not diminishing that what we made. I was really proud of it. I still really am. But trying to go to this next place, to try and take the record to somewhere that was, like, gonna really turn heads, and I was like, at the very least, we'll leave this campaign, like in a week tomorrow, Steve, this record comes out, and I guarantee no one's putting a record like this out next week other than us. Like, it's a weird record. It opens with Patricia Vanian talking in a voice of like Madame Leota from the Haunted Mansion. Like it's bonkers. It's a crazy record. But I'd much rather be behind the wheel of that record than behind the wheel of a safer one that sounded just like a more manicured version of our old songs, which is what people were trying to get us to do originally. And they were like they were terrified about us doing this at first. But Ian Dickinson, who you know well, who's our manager for those listening, really believed in me and in the vision for it and in the band, supported us all along the way, and the record label really got it by the end of it. Especially when we made Cyanide was the one they really got. But it took us a while, because how do you write it? What do you do? What do I do as a punk singer who's used to like shouting for half the song, then bursting into a chorus and then shouting, like kind of yelping in a melody? Like we had to learn a different style of singing, a different type of playing, different sort of instruments to use. Dan used like a vintage kit on certain songs and things. So, and Hannah had I remember I was trying to work out the beginning of that Annabelle song. trying to work that out. We've written the whole song, but the intro, I was like, oh god, I want to do the Suede homage, but we just couldn't get it right. It was either too close or too far away. And we sat there, just that little clip at the beginning, just looped and looped. I felt like we sat there for like 3 hours, just going over and over again. Hannah's on a synth, Ian's playing an arpeggio thing, just trying to learn the discipline of that style of songwriting and what comes along with that, which we'd never done before. So yeah, it was a weird record to make. It was good fun. Also, like, it was aside from all of the drama that came along with it, the actual creation of it all and kind of dreaming this stuff up was amazing. I think it's starting to hit me now a little bit that people are actually going to hear it. Obviously, the record at this point as well. They're about to hear that second act, which is some of the more challenging things. I think which I think people are either going to really gravitate toward or it's going to turn them off. I think, but. It's interesting that's I put that tweet out earlier on. That's the fun of all this. Like, isn't it better to be doing that than to doing a pop punk record, another pop punk record in 2020? Isn't that like?
Well, mate, I mean, I was going to bring up the tweet that you put. I mean, I feel like you're giving people ample warning that this record is not going to be something that they're going to be getting from anyone else. And you hear bands say that stuff all the time. Like, bands do say that kind of thing all the time, but I mean, if you haven't heard the record yet and you're watching this and you're going, yeah, it's just another band saying that. I think, I mean, particularly for the scene that you have been, maybe not the scene you came from, but certainly the scene that you've existed in the last couple of years, definitely bands don't take these sort of risks. With all due respect to the kind of slam dunk Warped Tour scene of bands, they just don't take these type of risks. And I think that, whether people turn around and go, man, do you know what? I fucking hate Suede and I hate all this 90s crap. And, he's doing 1950s doo-wop at the end and I'm not down with it. Like, I'm out. You've got to respect the fact that you guys have really tried to go, sharp left on this record. I think you have to. I think your fans will as well. I think they'll at least appreciate that.
Well, thanks, man. This is the thing. Well, like the funniest thing about all this, and the most hilarious thing, is that like, and the reason I think that you don't see this sort of thing happen more often, because I think people are like, you don't end up in a band that's like doing something unless you're like one of those trend hoppers that jump onto the thing that's going all right, But you don't start you don't get opportunities to do things if like you're not creative in the first place, because people don't believe in those people. They're really, you can see through them. They're fakes, and you can see it straight away. Like, it's so obvious. Like, you've seen them yourself like a million times on stages. You look through it straight away and go, okay. But like I feel like what happens is like you get to a certain point where like the jump that I made, where it became like my livelihood as well as like my hobby in my life, and if you don't succeed, you have to work out what you're going to do, so people, I think that's what happens. You get to a certain point where you get very comfortable. You're so hungry when you first start, man. You're so hungry. You're like, I just want to get out and play. I want to just go and tour. I never want to stop. And as time goes on, the things that come to you and the things you're lucky enough to achieve and things, people, I think that what happens with a lot of people is it becomes second nature, and then they don't want to lose that. So they start trying to make safe decisions, or if they are doing experimental ones, it's for a reason to get more poppy, which I guess you could argue this record is poppier than our last. It certainly is, but like, I just felt like I'd much rather just approach it as if none of this was happening. None of this happened. Imagine this is the first Creeper record, and like, what do I think is cool? What would be cool to listen to? What would I pick up and go, fuck, that's really rad. What a weird band. This is so weird. Like, and I'd rather play it fast and loose. And like, if we lose it all, in the same way that we've said from the beginning, if we lose it all based on, I think, a creative gamble that's backed up by a bunch of ideas and being creative guys from the very, very beginning, from when we first started our first band, like just wanting to make movies and wanting to fuse it all together. I'd much rather die on that hill than like fucking, then in 3 years' time still playing like the things that I didn't really believe anymore. And I was, like what I was saying to you earlier on about the callous heart, like we'll still play those songs now, and we'll be stoked to play them because we're playing them in amongst a new music that's also exciting and so they're different. But like, how you don't want to see me in 5 years' time wearing a Callous Heart jacket on stage. It sours what we did before. And much in the same way, you don't want to see me in the sheer amount of makeup I have to fucking wear for this project. My girlfriend does. You don't want to see me wearing that in 5 years' time. You want to see something else. And people have this tendency to always prefer the thing you've done before. Every time. It's happened already to us. It happened when we did our second EP. I prefer the first one. Then we did the third EP, and they go, prefer the second one. The second one was lots better. Did the album, and then the kids go, God, none of this is anywhere near as good as the EPs. And then I guarantee this time next week, when it's about to come out, it will come out, and people will go, God, I much prefer that album, that first album. And this is what they do, and they do it every time. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know whether I was guilty of it when I was younger either. But like, you just kind of have to not care. And I just feel like, I felt like a disenchantment with a lot of the kind of some of the scenes that we've been associated with. Not because I haven't got amazing friends there, not because I don't think there are talented people there. I just felt like there was like a glass ceiling in terms of creativity, and I felt like that shouldn't always be something that you're chasing something else. And that you know as well, what the cool thing about this is, if people like this record, if that actually happens, then it encourages us to go even more ridiculous for this next one. We were not going to repeat this again. We're just going to get a different box out, and go, okay, so what are we going to do now? Let's sit down and that's the thing. By encouraging artists to take these chances when they do them, like the way that Code Orange did, like how those last two records, they've made incredible creative leaps in both of those for the whole genre. And I think by supporting that and applauding that, I really like those records, but I know what you're saying. There are people that don't get those things that they've done. But I've got a lot of respect for Code Orange. I thought they've always been ahead of everybody else, in my opinion. That's just me. And they never fit in with the bands they're lumped with because they're always the odd one. And I see a lot of. It's weird because we don't play the same music at all. We never play together. We never met. But I see us as very similar people. We're kind of wrestling folks, we're both kind of people, like, always. I had this story about them, which I thought was so fucking cool. I don't know if you ever heard this before, but I heard a story that when they signed to Roadrunner, they wanted to Roadrunner to start a Roadrunner Black, so that they could do Roadrunner Red and Roadrunner Black, like NWO, and they would be on Roadrunner Black, and it would be like, and I was like, how clever is that? Like, that's so smart. That would have been such a cool thing to come out with. So every time I hear something about those guys and what they're doing, I just applaud it, and I think when you get behind a band like that, you can just expect, it only rewards you as a listener, because then you're going to get something wild and outlandish and for the next thing. What are they going to do next? I can't even imagine. It's going to be, but it'll be something essential, That's the thing. Rather than just another band, it's going to be something really fantastic, and that's exciting.
That's the thing, isn't it? I think if people get behind this record and you do well from it, and I really think you should do, and I think there'll be people who will either not have been aware of you, that will hear you and go, this band are great, who you might not have even thought 2 years ago could be potential fans or whatever, but it gives you carte blanche then to go, see, we were right, we're doing what we're doing. And Code Orange is a great shout, and I do see the similarities between you two guys, because there doesn't appear to be any kind of compromise as to what you want to do. I mean, I was, sorry to name drop, but I was talking to Barney from Napalm Death yesterday. Again, somebody who is not going to compromise for anyone at any point. And he said something brilliant. He said to me, he was like, people want to see you. They don't want to see an approximation of you. Because he was talking about bands doing this kind of, this run where they do album tour, album cycle, and they do the same thing over and over until it just becomes a kind of Xerox of the same thing. And heavy music now, and punk and whatever, it is an established form. It is an established formula that so many bands are just rigidly clinging to. And you don't have to reinvent the genre and take, entirely new things. You can take you can take Suede and the Lightning Seeds, and no one's touched that in punk rock ever. And, and no one's tried to kind of meld that with, Phil Spector and Americana, and just that as an idea, as I say it, as it comes, like I know what it sounds like, so I know that it sounds good, but even without like putting it next to your record, I can go, God, that's a really good idea. It's just a good idea that no one else has done before. And there's millions of those ideas just sitting there for everyone to be, siphoning up if they really, really thought about it. And I'm not sure people do think enough in that way. And that's why bands like yourselves are, we got to kind of wrap you in cotton wool a little bit, Will, to be honest.
I appreciate that, man. I just get so excited about bands, and I've always loved chatting to you because you get so excited and riled up as well, and you're so passionate about things. And obviously, for those who don't know, Steve used to play in bands when he was younger too, and bands I saw when I was a kid from back down south. I'm in Manchester now. I don't know if you know that, but
yeah, I knew that.
But yeah, it's funny. I was actually thinking the other day about this, how this record is it's such a weird old-fashioned record in so many different ways, even though it's got quite a modern production on it. But a lot of the reference points are from a different time. But also the other thing I think that stops bands being able to to really sit and think and to really, really properly evolve. Everyone says they evolve in these records, they never really do. But I think everything that stops that is this band was forced to take. We needed some time to make the record, and we also went through all that tragedy that happened. That's been well documented in the press at this point. It's everywhere, and I can understand. It was exhausting to talk about, and because it was very terrible. But at the same time, we had a year off. From our last record came out in 2017. We're in 2020 now, when this one's coming out. How these days in this current climate, when bands are forced to sometimes release 2 releases a year because they wanted to stay relevant and in people's eyes. AFI used to take years out between records. I think about when we were kids, like Manson doing records would take years out. These gaps in being able to work on your craft, and labels used to sign career bands. Like that. It was. We'll stick with you at the bottom when you're struggling, because we know it will pay off when you get to album 5, because you're going to work this out. That's how all these good bands started. It's like Fleetwood Mac and stuff, that, how long was it before they got to Rumours? How long was it before AFI got to their first #1 Billboard, which was December Underground? That's a long way from where they started, but you've got to stick with it. Exactly, yeah. And so I feel but that's the same with a lot of bands. There's no time for them to do anything anymore. Everyone's worried about losing their spot. Again, it's a wrestling term, but it's the best way I can describe it. Where they are and their level and their festival billing and their guarantee and if their audience is going to drop off, or if they did try and do something else out there in that time, they haven't got enough time to work on it anyway because they have to push on and release. And I just think that's not a very conductive environment to be creative, in my opinion. No. You have to wait for it to come. You have to work on it. You got to love it and let it grow and to a point where you're like, okay, this is done now. I'm happy to show the world this, rather than just have to rush through it, have 10 writers write your songs for you and smash it out into the world. For me, that doesn't sound like a very conducive writing environment. I don't know about you. Can you imagine having to do that? Imagine having to release a song singles instead of albums now. That just seems mad. It seems like a crazy thing.
It is, and it drives me mad when you hear, whether it's Black Peaks or Milk Teeth, or there's been great bands that have come along and they've done an album and everything's gone, this is amazing, and then something's happened which has derailed them slightly, and people go, that's it, they're done, they're finished, and it's come on, man, come on, they're kids, they've got one album out. It's insane. It's an insane thing.
It's madness about that. 100%. But the problem is we have we're in a culture now where there are so many acts, there are so many bands going and doing things, and so there's always someone who's going to capitalize and someone not being able to play something, or it's a competitive weird war zone, and it's just not very creative in my opinion. I feel like we should be letting that, like you said, when Will got, he had his voice, didn't he, Will, from Black Peaks? Yeah. When that happened to him, that's just the worst possible thing. He's what a lovely bloke Will is. I met him at the Heavy Music Awards, just instantly magnetized towards him. Thought he was a really fantastic bloke, but that was such a great band too. The idea that people would write them off because of a setback or something is just so stupid. It's just so doesn't even make any sense. And I don't know. With rock music in the state it's in, you speak about this quite a lot anyway. I don't know. We need to be nurturing this stuff, and and encouraging creativity, giving people enough time to recover, and providing them that platform for that when they come back, everyone's waiting and it can get going again, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Mate, before you go, the other thing that we haven't even touched on yet is whilst all this kind of drama was going on and while you've learnt how to write basically a completely new style of music in the interim period, there's also what I imagine, having listened to the album quite a few times, some sort of thematic thing going on within the album. I don't know how much you want to talk about that or how much you want to leave that to people's imagination. Is this a continuation? I mean, can you say, is this a continuation from, you know, the characters that we have met through the Creeper story before? But what's going on here, as much as you, or as little as you would like to tell me?
I've been speaking about it quite a lot at this point, but it's like kind of a new story. Like I wrote this while I was out in America years ago, back in 2017 actually. It's where I started devising this. At the end of the last one, I started working on the new one.
Yeah.
I see them like a series of books or films, and so this is like the new film. And it's it's kind of unsurprising that this one would be so different from our last, but in the same way filmmakers' films would be different as well. You know, different characters deserve a different. And different stories deserve a different soundtrack, you know, and the way it looks and dresses should be as different as well. But this is about our last record was based in Southampton, which it was, and the stories and the characters were based around making that more fantastic and less grey and dull. That was a record that was about where we came from, and this record kind of talks about where we've been since, which is traveling America mostly. We toured America like non-stop. We did tours with Neck Deep, with Tiger Army. We're on the Warped Tour. We were just there for like loads and loads of stuff. So we were there an awful lot amount of time. So we spent so much time there. I was like, this record that's how it should be the American record. And so I started thinking about. I was reading a book at the time called K-Pax. Lots of these ideas always come from literature, not more often than not. Yeah. K-Pax was made into a film with Kevin Spacey, which is terrible. Don't watch it. But the book's great. And the book.
I was going to say, you're not going to get many people watching that film.
No, it's. I mean, he's a terrible man, isn't he? But he's also not very good in that film as an actor anyway. So don't worry. You're not missing much. But the story like kind of hinges around a man who claims to be from another world, and they look him in a psychiatric unit and try to evaluate him and think he's got a mental condition, and it's kind of is he or isn't he from this other world? And I was like, okay, that's interesting. Like playing with tropes from like kind of the man who fell to earth has been a classic rock and roll trope for years. David Bowie, Marilyn Manson. You know, the people have done this but no one had done it in recent memory. And so I thought about trying to reinvent and do our own version of something like that. So what I came up with was this. It was based on a bunch of religious stuff that I learned when I went to Catholic school as a kid, and it was about a town that has 7 families that lives in sin. Basically, it's seven deadly sins, 7 families for each one of the 7 deadly sins. And one day, a boy claims to be an angel with a prophecy. Is found in a mine called Roe. And he says, I'm here with this message to tell you that in 7 days, the world as you know it will end. And he said, on that 7th day, I'm going to return to whence I came, and your world as you know it will end. And so across the course of that week, Roe doesn't realize, but he falls in love with a human being and begins displaying signs of human emotion for the first time. He learns how to feel and learns what it is to sin, because this girl is engaged to Buddy Calvary, the richest family in town. And so it all kicks off, and then over the course of this week, a lot happens to this character. Learns how to be a human being, kind of humanizes him and helps him to feel. And the two of them on the 7th day, Roe and Annabelle, are in pursuit by Buddy Calvary as they climb St. Peter's Mountain for the world to end as they know it, and him to return to whence he came. When he meets him at the top, Buddy, like her fiancé, is at the top, and shoots him with a pistol through the heart and kills the boy. So you never find out where he was from, but the townspeople see this as too much and then end up repenting their sins, and their world as they know it is never the same again. So it's a classic Bible story. It draws on lots of classic fairy tales. It's apocalyptic romance. It is sci-fi mixed with kind of like I don't know, a lot of things that were going on in my real life at the time too, but like not at the time I wrote the story really enough. It was kind of a few years before the religious stuff with Ian and Miles happened. If you've not listened to the podcast right now, I hope you don't mind me giving a shout out on air. Giles Bitter did a fantastic podcast about the creation of this record called Creeper: The True Story of Sex, Death, and the Infinite Void, and it was something I was quite hesitant about doing at first, because there's so much, like, there's a real darkness to this record that no one's really known about, and it's been hinted at in the press, but like Giles basically was an old friend of ours who played in a band called Great Cynics, who you might have seen a few times, I imagine, at some point or another.
I remember the name slightly, yeah, I do.
Very, very cool band. We've been friends with him for years. Anyway, he was interviewing me for one of his podcasts, and he briefly asked me about the album, and I told him a small detail. And he called me up a few days later and asked if he could make this series. And I wasn't very sure about it, because it's... I wasn't even sure he was going to believe some of the stuff that happened. And in the end, he... I said yes, but in my head I wouldn't really tell him everything. But he researched and he interviewed me extensively for hours and hours and hours over multiple weeks and days. And Ian Miles in a similar sort of amount. And Zandy Barry, our producer, Ian Dickinson, our manager, Hannah Greenwood from the band as well. There's a bunch of us involved in it, and people from the record label and stuff as well, like who tell this story. And Ian Miles is very, very candid and very, very honest about it. So it kind of tells some of the truths, and it's been a really difficult moment for us. If you're interested, if anyone listening is interested in the way a record gets made, or especially at with what we've done in particular, or and the stresses of what being in the music industry does to you, I would recommend listening to it. It's part one was out on this Monday it's gone, I believe. If this is coming out next week, the second one may be up by now, which is when Ian begins talking, and this is when the real it should come with a big trigger warning, by the way, for mental health. It's about to get quite heavy now as the weeks go on, and it's 5 episodes in total. But I think it's important, and Ian decided to talk about it because he wanted to normalise the discussion of mental health and the things that have happened to him. So I'm very proud of him. So like our story kind of emulates a lot of these themes as well. Like a lot of like the records in terms of like your subconscious, if you understand. I was in love with somebody as well at the time I was writing this, so there's a lot of romance in the lyrics from that. But like you can see our story if you start learning a little bit more about our real lives and what was going on behind the scenes. You can see how the story makes sense, and how I wrote that story years before this all happened, and how kind of life has imitated art quite substantially, and it's very strange.
It's a creepy. That sounds like I'm trying to make a pun there. It's a creepy thing, but it's an unusual thing. It's an unusual thing. But I mean, after all this, mate, you have a very, very good record. Very, very good record to show for it all. I'm going to get the vinyl. I hope I'm not affected. My house isn't going to burn down if I buy the vinyl and be affected.
Well, I'll show you. One sec.
He's gone.
I've got a copy here, and my house is still standing right now. For the time being, but I have been concerned about this entering my home because I know the damage and like. So we tried to do this cover like when I found Hunky Dory for the first time in my dad's record collection. I wanted it to look like weathered, but now it's turned up. It feels like a relic from the past, and I'm kind of concerned. It's like having one of Tutankhamun's kind of artifacts. They stole them, and everyone had one of those. And it kind of scares me that it's actually here in printed in front of me now.
Well, mate, worth the risk. I'm going to get it anyway. It's worth the risk, dude. It's lovely speaking to you, man. And I hope I get to see you soon. I mean, I know you're going to be doing some shows, God willing, fingers crossed. So I hope to be able to get down to one of them. And, good luck with the record. I think it's great, like really, really great. And it's good to hear something sort of genuinely different from the millions and millions of records that I get sent every week. So I'm very happy. And it's been lovely chatting to you, mate. Send all my love to the other Creeper crew. And we'll hopefully see you soon, man. Thanks for talking to us.
Steve, you're one of my favourite people to talk to over the years. I feel like we've always really understood each other quite well as well, and so it means a lot to me that you sat and listened to the record and took it in. And there's pools of influences. It's so funny. how accurate, after all this time of knowing you now, like still how accurate you can kind of see through me, and you see what we're doing very well. You can see the workings of this stuff, and I appreciate that though, because that shows that someone really listens, and you know that's the thing you worry about the most when you're making these things. Well, no one cares this time, no one listens, and so I appreciate you very much, Steve. Thank you for having me on. I'm sorry I was an hour late, everybody, for everyone listening as well. So Steve was very patient.
But to be fair, then I also cut off the call as well. So
yes.
it's been a disaster basically on both of our parts. It's again the curse of the new crew strikes again. I mean, if this is the worst thing that's going to happen, then I'll definitely take it. I hope.
I think this is the worst thing. You're safe now. You know that you'll be all right now.
That's cool. All right, mate. It's been a joy and a delight, and I hopefully will see you soon. Cheers for chatting to us, Will. See you soon.
No problem, man. Thank you.